Behind the billions. Imagine a single machine that cost over $200 million. It weighs nearly 200 tons, requires 3 entire Boeing 747 cargo planes just to ship, and consumes enough electricity to power an entire small town. Inside this machine, a tiny drop of molten tin is dropped through a vacuum chamber. A high-powered industrial laser blasts this microscopic droplet twice, 40,000 times, every single second. This violent explosion creates a state of matter as hot as the surface of the sun, emitting a highly volatile, nearly impossible to control wavelength of light, called Extreme Ultraviolet, or EUV. Without this machine, modern human civilization instantly grinds to a complete halt. Apple cannot manufacture a single iPhone. Nvidia cannot produce the microscopic brains for artificial intelligence. TSMC and Samsung cannot build the advanced microchips that power global military networks, financial systems, and cloud databases. If this machine stops shipping, the multi-trillion-dollar global tech economy completely vanishes. What is truly terrifying is that this machine is not made by a superpower nation like the United States or China. It is designed and manufactured by just one single, highly secretive company, hidden in the quiet suburbs of Veldhoven, Netherlands. A company called ASML. Today, ASML holds an absolute, unbreakable 100% monopoly over the most advanced lithography technology on Earth. They are the ultimate, undisputed gatekeepers of human progress. But 40 years ago, this global tech superpower was an absolute joke. They were a failing, broke joint venture, born inside a leaky, temporary wooden shed, ruthlessly mocked by the rest of the world. How does a bankrupt European underling transform into the single, most dangerous monopoly in the history of capitalism? The answer lies in a terrifying, multi-decade gamble on an impossible technology that every single sane expert on the planet claimed was corporate suicide. In the 1980s, the semiconductor lithography market was a bloody battlefield, dominated by the unstoppable titans of Japan, Nikon and Canon. Lithography is essentially the process of using light to print microscopic circuit designs onto silicon wafers. At the time, Nikon was the undisputed king. They possessed the finest optical engineering, the deepest corporate pockets, and the absolute trust of global chipmakers like Intel. ASML, which stood for Advanced Semiconductor Materials Lithography, was a desperate, chaotic joint venture between a manufacturing company called ASM and the struggling electronics giant, Philips. When ASML was officially founded in 1984, they didn't even have a proper office. Their engineers worked inside a makeshift wooden shed, right next to a Philips factory. When global clients visited, the roof would literally leak rainwater onto the executives' desks. Nikon and Canon looked at ASML with absolute contempt. ASML had no capital, a tiny market share, and their technology was constantly breaking down. Sane business strategy dictated that ASML should focus on catching up to Japan's current standards, making cheaper versions of standard machines to survive. But the leaders of ASML realized a brutal capitalist truth. In the tech industry, if you follow the leader, you are already dead. They decided that to beat Japan, they couldn't just run faster. They had to change the entire physical laws of the race. In the late 1990s, the global tech industry hit a physical brick wall. Chip makers were desperately trying to make transistors smaller to fulfill Moore's law. To print smaller circuits, you need a smaller, shorter wavelength of light. Traditional deep ultraviolet light was getting too thick to print the microscopic lines required for the next generation of computing. The radical, crazy solution proposed by a small group of rogue scientists was Extreme Ultraviolet, or EUV. In theory, EUV light had a wavelength so short, it could print circuits down to the nanometer level. But practically, it was a scientific nightmare. EUV light is so volatile that it is physically absorbed by almost everything on Earth. It is absorbed by ordinary glass lenses. It is even absorbed by air. To make an EUV machine work, you had to create a massive, perfect vacuum inside a machine. And instead of lenses, you had to bounce the light off of the most perfectly smooth mirrors ever created by human hands. Every single major tech company looked at EUV and walked away. Nikon and Canon publicly announced that EUV was a scientific impossibility that would never be commercially viable. Wall Street financial analysts aggressively warned that pouring money into EUV was the equivalent of throwing billions of dollars into a bottomless black hole. But ASML's leadership looked into that black hole and saw their destiny. They possessed a dogmatic, almost fanatic conviction that whoever controlled EUV would control the future of the world. They bet the entire financial survival of their company on a science project that had a 99% chance of failing. To understand the sheer madness of ASML's gamble, you have to realize they couldn't build this machine alone. Because nobody had ever manipulated EUV light before, the necessary components simply did not exist on Earth. So ASML did something completely unheard of in modern corporate management. They didn't just buy parts from suppliers. They actively took their own scarce cash reserves and heavily subsidized their partners. They bought a massive 25% stake in Carl Zeiss, a German optics company, just to fund the development of the most flawless mirrors in human history. These mirrors are so perfectly smooth that if you expanded one mirror to the size of the entire United States, the largest bump on the surface would be less than a single millimeter high. Next, they spent nearly $500 million to completely acquire an American company called Cymer, simply because Cymer was the only company trying to figure out how to blast molten tin with lasers to create the EUV light source. For nearly 20 years, ASML poured billions of dollars into this unproven, bleeding technology. Year after year, they generated zero revenue from EUV. Their stock price stagnated, and investors consistently demanded they abandon the project and return to making traditional, profitable machines. But ASML's board and leadership maintained an iron grip. They ruthlessly ignored the short term, greed of shareholders, and the laughter of their Japanese competitors. And then, the laws of physics finally surrendered to their dogmatism. By the late 2010s, ASML did the mathematically impossible. They successfully built the world's first commercial EUV lithography machine. The aftermath was immediate and devastating for the rest of the world. Nikon and Canon, having abandoned EUV years ago, realized they were decades behind. They were physically locked out of the future. They officially surrendered, announcing they would never build EUV machines. Suddenly, ASML was left standing completely alone on the mountaintop. They had successfully built an inescapable technological moat. If Intel, TSMC, or Samsung wanted to participate in the smartphone boom, the cloud computing revolution, or the current explosive artificial intelligence gold rush, they had no choice. They had to fly to the Netherlands, wait in a long line, and personally beg ASML for a machine. Today, ASML's EUV machines are so rare and valuable that they are treated as highly strategic geopolitical weapons. The United States government actively blocks ASML from shipping these machines to China, knowing that controlling ASML is equivalent to controlling the computing power of the entire human race. The story of ASML is the ultimate, undeniable proof that, in the highest echelons of global business, true greatness is never achieved by listening to the consensus of the market, the highly educated financial analysts, the logical market experts, and the massive Japanese competitors were all perfectly rational, data-driven, and completely wrong. It took the fanatical, unyielding dogmatism of a company willing to work out of a leaky wooden shed and spend 20 years chasing an impossible life to build the foundation of the modern digital empire. They walked alone into a dark scientific void, ignored the mockery of the world, and emerged holding the single most powerful monopoly on Earth.
Tap to subscribe. Watch more untold stories next.